Welcome to the podcast Into the Weeds, where we dive into the latest developments on Capitol Hill and American legislation. I'm Fabian Kuzmik, your host and the US Secretary of Energy. Today we're going to be discussing the Inflation Reduction Act that was signed into law by President Joe Biden on the 16th of August 2022. In this episode, we are asking, how will the Inflation Reduction Act impact the transition from brown to green jobs in light of the technological transition? We'll be exploring how these concurrent transitions interact with one another and how the Inflation Reduction Act is helping to drive these changes. We'll also be examining the potential challenges and opportunities that these changes present for workers, businesses, and the broader economy. To discuss this here with me, I've invited two special guests. Could you please introduce yourselves?
Hello, my name is Naz. I am representing ExxonMobil, the largest investor-owned multinational oil and gas corporation, headquartered in the US, and thank you for having me on your show.
Hello, my name is Janos, and I'm a representative of the company called NextEra Energy, and we're one of America's largest capital investors in infrastructure, focusing on solar and wind energy. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today on this show.
Thank you for being here with me on our show. The policies of the Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA, can be divided into three buckets: the healthcare and tax elements, and also the climate provisions, which we will focus on in this episode. According to the Democratic Party, the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022 will invest approximately $369 billion in energy security and climate change programs over the next 10 years, which seek to promote clean energy. Among its big goals are that it lowers energy costs, increases cleaner production, and reduces carbon emissions by roughly 40% by 2030. The famous economist Paul Krugman mentions that one key aspect of this transition is the shift from brown jobs, which are typically associated with the fossil fuel industry, to green jobs, which are related to the renewable energy sector and environmental conservation. But this shift isn't just about changing the sources of energy we use. It's also about the way we work and the tools and technologies we use to do so. In recent years, according to David Autor from MIT, we've seen a significant increase in the automation and augmentation of work, with the use of robotics, artificial intelligence, and other advanced technologies becoming more prevalent. While automation erodes the importance of certain human skills, augmentation describes new technologies complementing human labor by letting new work tasks emerge. Now on to my guests. Janos, as a representative of NextEra Energy, one of, as you said, America's largest capital investors in infrastructure, your firm particularly benefits from the clean energy tax credits. For example, the tax credit of up to 30% on investment into production facilities. This is described as one of the key drivers of decarbonization and lower consumer energy costs in the IRA. And the long-term expansion, and the clean electricity tax credit seek to promote the green transition. What is your position on the policies set out in the IRA?
So I am personally very supportive of the Inflation Reduction Act and its potential to support the growth of renewable energy industry and the transition to a cleaner, more sustainable economy. As the environment is extremely important to me, I believe that the IRA is a good way to go and is the start of a new, hopefully sustainable world. And in the renewable energy industry and also at our firm, we are constantly striving to reduce our carbon footprint and transition to cleaner forms of energy.
Thank you for your contribution. I would like to point out a bit more the background of the climate provisions of the IRA, and an analysis commissioned by the Blue-Green Alliance and researched by the Political Economy Research Institute at the University of Massachusetts, Amherst, estimates that the IRA's more than 100 climate, energy, and environmental investments will lead to more than 9 million green jobs over the next decade, breaking down to nearly 1 million new jobs each year. In addition, a study by the economists Curtis and Marinescu from the National Bureau of Economic Research claims that the growth of renewable energy leads to the creation of relatively high-paying jobs, which are often located in areas that stand to lose from a decline in fossil fuel extraction jobs.
Elaborating on this further and explaining the economic concept behind these findings, as investments stemming from the IRA increase the demand of labor within green sectors, such as renewable energy, more jobs in these sectors will be created, and if the labor supply does not match up with the demand, wages of skilled workers within these sectors will increase. On the other side, with less demand for fossil fuels and less productivity of fossil fuel companies, the demand for labor will decrease in brown sectors. Brown jobs will be destroyed and replaced by green jobs. However, the transition also poses some risks for some other companies, as some companies struggle to meet the costs of transitioning to renewables, and there is a lack of skill to set transition. They may turn to automation as a way to reduce costs. While automation can increase efficiency and productivity, it can also lead to job losses and a decline in job opportunities for human workers. This can have negative economic consequences, such as lower employment and income for workers, as well as reduced demand for goods and services. I quickly mentioned reskilling, and what I mean by this is that a lot of workers have specific skills for the fossil fuel energy sector, and it takes significant reskilling and retraining for the transition to renewable energy.
I completely agree with you, Janos, on this point. I'm convinced that the US government can and has to play an important role in the process of reskilling the American workforce, especially the workers that are negatively impacted by automation and the green transition. To be more specific, in the final report of the MIT Task Force Work of the Future, the authors have mentioned several possibilities for training programs funded by the US government to promote the acquisition of new skills. We will link this report in the show notes. In such training programs, it is especially important to combine three factors. First, we have to focus on a close relationship with the employers to figure out their industry needs. Second, we need to provide support services and counseling for clients that are participating in these training programs, such as weekly group meetings. And third, we need to promote substantial investment in training by highlighting the resulting benefits, not only for workers, but also for the productivity of companies and the overall economy. Targeted interventions can tackle unemployment and inequality, as well as mitigate wage polarization. Wage polarization means that more highly skilled workers receive a higher and higher wage, and other workers, on the other hand, receive a lower and lower wage. Critics of the IRA, such as David Sirota and Julia Rock, denigrate its lingering favorable tone towards fossil fuel companies, which I would like to talk about next. Others, such as David Blackmon from Forbes, consider big players like ExxonMobil, which we also have here with us on this show, as part of the solution and climate action through carbon capture projects that could potentially ease the reallocation of brown jobs. Naz, could you please tell me more about the details of that project and also how you would respond to such criticism that the fossil fuel companies are receiving too many benefits from the IRA?
Yes, of course. Let me first tell you about this project and give a couple of details. ExxonMobil has recently announced a carbon capture project that aims to remove 2 million metric tons of carbon dioxide from CF Industries' factory each year. And this is almost like equivalent to replacing 700,000 gasoline-powered vehicles with electric versions. This project involves ExxonMobil capturing and removing carbon dioxide from CFC factories, as I mentioned before, which is a major emitter of greenhouse gases. This will be done through the use of carbon dioxide and storage technology, which is designed to capture and store carbon dioxide emissions before they're released into the atmosphere.
Okay, and what are the goals of the project and how does it fit into ExxonMobil's overall strategy?
ExxonMobil has committed to investing 15 billion in carbon capture and storage by 2027, and the company's president Dan Ammann has indicated that they may invest more. The company sees as a big business opportunity in this area and is receiving interest from companies across a range of industries, sectors, and geographies. In addition to its financial goals, ExxonMobil has also pledged to remove as much carbon from the atmosphere as it emits by 2050. This carbon capture project is a part of that effort.
We've been discussing ExxonMobil's carbon capture project and its goals. But another question that comes to mind is how this project will affect the labor market, as we've already talked about the impacts of on the labor market from the renewable energy with János. Can you talk a little bit more about those impacts on the labor market?
Yes, of course. The impact of ExxonMobil's carbon capture project on labor market is an actually interesting aspect to consider. One potential impact is that it could create new job opportunities in the field of carbon capture and storage. As the company invests more in this technology, it will likely to hire more employees with the skills and expertise to develop and implement carbon capture projects. And this could lead to job growth in the sector. On the other hand, it is also important to consider the potential displacement of workers in traditional fossil fuel industries as the shift towards low carbon technologies accelerates. Some workers may need to retrain or transition to new industries, and it's important for companies and governments to provide support for these workers during this process. So overall, the impact of ExxonMobil's carbon capture project on the labor market is likely to be complex and multifaceted. It's important to consider both the potential job opportunities it may create as well as the potential impacts on workers in traditional fossil fuel industries.
Thank you, Naz. You're touching on a really important economic concept here, job reallocation, within industries and within the broader economy. This is going to be a major challenge of the labor market in the context of the technological and the green transition. Job reallocation refers to the process of shifting workers from one occupation or industry to another, as the economy shifts towards a more sustainable and low-carbon future. This process may involve moving workers from jobs in traditional extractive fossil fuel projects to carbon capture projects, such as Naz explained earlier, or moving workers across sectors to jobs in renewable energy or other sustainable industries. A recent report by the IMF from April 2022 highlights the difficulties of this labor reallocation and mentions that highly skilled workers face an easier transition, again highlighting the importance of training. The IRA aims to create a framework for the reskilling process of the American workforce by introducing targeted labor and workforce development standards, as pointed out by the report by the Center for American Progress. For instance, to explain the particular tool that the IRA uses to create such a framework, the IRA aims to introduce prevailing wage and registered apprenticeship targets, and therefore through that increase the quality of jobs and form pathways for entering new jobs. Now that we have discussed in detail how the Inflation Reduction Act will impact the transition from brown to green jobs in light of the technological transition, I would like to invite each of my guests one last time to the opportunity to sum up and share their conclusions on this topic.
So to conclude my viewpoint, the Inflation Reduction Act has some positive effects on the economy in the short and long term. It will cause new high-paying jobs, but there are some risks involved too. Some companies might not be able to make the switch to renewables, so in order to keep up with the competition, they might be forced to turn to automation, which result in short-term job loss. The Inflation Reduction Act is also not sufficient to address the pressing issues of climate change and the transition to renewables. We need more comprehensive and targeted policies to support the growth of the renewable energy industry and create a sustainable future for all. We need to tackle climate change globally, not focusing solely on one country. While this policy can have some benefits for the overall economy, in the US it is not enough to address the urgent issue of climate change and reach our emission targets by 2030. Thank you a lot for the opportunity to speak today.
Well, to conclude on my part, ExxonMobil's carbon capture project represents an important step in our efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and address the issue of climate change. We see a big business opportunity in this area, and we're confident that our investment in carbon capture and storage technology will pay off in the long run. We are also committed to working with our partners and stakeholders to ensure that the transition to a low-carbon economy is smooth and successful. We believe that this project is an important part of a larger effort to build a more sustainable future for all of us.
Thank you very much, Nas, for expressing ExxonMobil's commitment to be part of the solution and for your collaborative spirit in the transition to a more sustainable future for all. And also thank you very much, János, for pointing out the challenges of the renewable energy sector and that there is still a lot to be done to reduce our carbon emissions significantly. To conclude, on the impacts on the labor market, on my part, I would like to summarize what workers will experience in the green transition in light of the technological transition. As Stefanos Touros, a PhD candidate at the Vrije Universiteit in Amsterdam, points out, highly skilled workers will face fewer challenges in response to automation or the destruction of brown jobs because they can easily find new jobs, given that demand for highly skilled workers is going to be high. And there's going to be a growth of high-skilled occupations. On the other hand, Touros points out that jobs that can be easily automated do not have the skills for green jobs, and that makes the compelling case for reskilling and for government-funded training programs. And with training programs, I'm confident that we will have a smooth transition to a more sustainable future that will not only benefit workers, but also companies and the economy in large. Thank you all very much for your participation in this informative discussion, and also thank you very much to the listeners for tuning in, and stay tuned for our next episode in the podcast Into the Weeds.